Welcome to the I Storm Women's channel and the 16 Days of Activism podcast in conjunction with UN Women UK and fundraising for Safe Spaces Now.
Public spaces need to be safe and inclusive for all, now. A report by UN Women UK reveals how common sexual harassment is in the UK. 97% of women my age said they had experienced harassment. Your ideas to support us have already started making a change. At music festivals, with taxi companies, on public transport, in organisations and in online spaces. It's time for a change. Please support Safe Spaces Now by donating to the cause or get involved. You can find the link next to this video. Thank you.
So my name is Asha Mohammed. I'm a junior doctor for the NHS. I'm also an activist against FGM. So thank you so much for joining us in this campaign and helping us raise awareness around violence against women and girls. In this episode, we're talking about FGM, which stands for female genital mutilation. I'm very pleased to have two participants with me on this podcast, Heritage and Lynda, and I'll let them introduce themselves. They will both share their knowledge and expertise on this topic. So I hope you're excited to learn from them. And I'll let you introduce yourself first, Lynda.
Thank you very much, Asha. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynda Odoh. I'm a medical doctor by background, and I've got an interest in addressing health inequalities, specifically about looking at how where people are born, where they grow, where they live, where they get to work through the course of their life affects their health outcomes as individuals. And you can't think about FGM without thinking about the fact that a singular risk factor for FGM is the factor of where a person is born. So being born into an FGM community makes all that difference. So I am quite happy to be here to raise awareness about this, to talk about it with other like minds in this year's 16 days of activism against gender-related violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Lynda. And Heritage, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Heritage Sanmi-Lawal. Based in Leicester, United Kingdom, but I've also I run an organization, non-governmental organization in Nigeria, and we are focused on empowering women and girls. And with FGM, I think it was very particular to us because we realized how related and linked it is to child marriage, which is very prevalent in the African continent. So we work with dealing with prevalent issues that have not really come to the attention of the government, and there are really no measures in place to address them. So yes, so I run Her Dream Initiative in Nigeria and across about 6 countries where we have our volunteer presence as well.
It's amazing. Thank you both for sharing what you guys do. I'm very excited to learn from you both. So I'm going to start by asking Lynda to explain what FGM means for those who don't know what it is.
Okay, thank you, Asha. In the simplest possible terms I would be using, FGM, also in full terms, female genital mutilation, and also called female circumcision in some parts of the world, or female cutting. They have different terms across different continents. It's a surgical procedure that involves removal of parts or whole or making any alterations to the female external genitals. And it's done with the purpose of maybe socio-cultural reasons or socio-cultural norms, nothing related to any medical reason. So in that sense, it's removal of a healthy human part.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And Heritage, would you like to explain what you think FGM means for those who don't know what it means?
Yes, I think it's pretty much everything she said. I also quite agree that there is no medical meaning attached to it. I mean, a lot of people argue and debate that there might be some medical reason for FGM, but we've come to see that there's literally nothing scientific in itself backing up cutting a part or a whole of, the female external organ. So it is also a very vital part. I think that's something we need to realize, that it's a vital part of the body of a woman or a female. So cutting off that part literally means that you're cutting off some parts of our health in literal terms. So I think that's like the more imaginative meaning to it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the most important part that you've both mentioned is that it's for no medical reason. There's no benefit of doing this apart from causing harm. And Heritage, would you like to just explain to us if FGM is legal in the UK?
Oh, it's not. It's not. And you know, we can say that being legal or illegal really doesn't count, but it does. It counts a lot.
Yeah.
The laws and measures in place to address FGM are quite in place in the UK. I think the major problem might be the enforcement, as opposed to many other countries across the world where FGM isn't still regarded as something to be um tackled by the law. So I think we have a number of laws regarding the health system, regarding midwives, regulations on FGM regarding midwives in Wales, in the UK as well. So I think generally there are some measures in place, and um, people can tell that there are some comprehensive health centers to report to when you want to file a case or when you want to report FGM in the UK.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Lynda?
Yeah, Heritage has said like one of the key things I think about when I consider FGM, and that is the fact that we can say literally that legalization or illegalization doesn't matter, but really it makes a lot of difference. And it doesn't just stop there. Enforcement, implementation of the paperwork that have been done to illegalize something is also as important as making the policy. So I know that in the United Kingdom, FGM has been illegal since 1985, put in paper that this is illegal and as such recognized as a crime against humanity. And it doesn't stop there. Being a doctor in my capacity as well, I know I've been exposed to several trainings, basically to keep you aware of what to look out for. And the same is also done from what I know across schools within England, within the United Kingdom as a whole, so that teachers are able to identify any child who might be at risk within that likely age from infancy up until puberty. So they would always say during safeguarding events, if you hear a child who is around puberty saying, I'm traveling somewhere and I'm going to go for this event, after that event, I'll be grown up, then you have to have your professional curiosity spiked up, looking out for what could be this event that would make her grown up. So it's really a lot has been put into making the policy and implementing. And like Heritage pointed out, putting people in strategic places who can help identify people at risk and also addressing those issues. So it's a good movement going on in the United Kingdom. And the interesting part of it as well is that it doesn't stop at if you've done FGM practices within the UK. If you've taken a child out of the United Kingdom to any other parts of the world where it's legal to have FGM activities done on them, then you're prone to, I think it's 14 years imprisonment with some fine attached to it. So it's quite a very serious issue, and it's being addressed with the weight that it deserves, if I'll put it that way. In some other parts of the world, I do know that we have policies in place. So just like Heritage, I'm from Nigeria as well.
Yeah.
I don't know we have policies in place about FGM, but when I was looking through the data, it did say that I think there's a policy, an act called VAP. I think it's Vulnerable Act, some act against protection of people. and it was put in place either 2017 or 2018. But the interesting thing is that when a survey was done 3 years after, not a single person has been caught that has practiced FGM. So they have the policy, but then who is the responsible person in the community? Do you have an FGM lead with the police? Do you have an FGM lead with the schools? Do you have an FGM lead within church communities, religious communities, and all of that? So I do agree. Where I come from, for instance, FGM practices are kind of reducing. It's beginning, we have an FGM abandonment exercise going on. People are gradually not doing it for their kids, not just in this generation, but in the generation before this. But then there is no drive to say that as a community, we stand against this. So what it means is that there are still children within the gaps who will fall through the cracks. So it just means that the singular risk factor still remains. If a child is born into a family who still upholds this practice, then that child is at risk of having FGM done. And that is why making it illegal and saying this is no, and this has a punishment or a consequence for that action that is the same weight as the impact you've had on that child is very, very crucial.
Definitely. Thank you both for that insightful knowledge. I think with FGM, as you both said, there's the FGM Act from 2003, and it was updated in 2015, which makes it illegal for anyone to perform or be part of performing FGM, and also makes it illegal for any parents, for example, to bring their children abroad to have it done. And I think, as you said, it's very difficult to prove that FGM has happened. There's not been, I think there's been maybe one successful conviction in the UK, but I know there's been a couple of trials and there's been a few in Bristol, but it's very difficult to prove that it's happened. And but I do think it's very important that the laws in the UK are very firm on this, and I think it's important to sort of, re-emphasize that it's a form of child abuse, and that it shouldn't happen. And Lynda, I'll just start with you again. Do you think that FGM is being performed in the UK, following on from our earlier conversation?
I do not have the statistics on that, so I wouldn't be able to specifically say that FGM is still being performed in the UK. But what we do know is that because of the growing diversity of the United Kingdom and the world at large, people are traveling across different places, moving to different parts of the world, not just the United Kingdom. It means that we will have a diversity, a cultural diversity of people in a place. We will have some people who perhaps still have FGM practices close to their hearts. And then that means that we need to be, if you're in any position like you both are, you will be on the lookout for people who you think might be at risk, and then see how you can be of help to them. So for instance, if you're working in the capacity of, if you've got a friend, for instance, who you think might be at risk of FGM, then you'll be able to link them up with services that can help prevent. And even the first thing you would see from NHS guidelines would be call the police. 999 is the first point of contact if you think anyone is at risk of FGM, especially if it's a vulnerable person who is involved. So in terms of that light, I wouldn't say I know a specific number of people who have had FGM done, but for us to have that level of awareness and guard, it means that there could be practices going on, but the goal is to prevent them from happening. So like we both pointed out, it's not just about if it has happened in the United Kingdom. Once someone who lives in the United Kingdom has had FGM practice anywhere in the world, then it's still recognized as a crime and is punishable within the United Kingdom.
Exactly. And Heritage, do you have anything to add?
Yes, just that I mean, like Doctor mentioned, the biggest thing or the biggest challenge would be tracking the people who are traveling out of the UK and then coming back. I think I'll take a textbook analysis from Hibo's book. She wrote a book on FGM, I think it's called Caught. And she actually gave a statistics of, thousands of girls in some parts of the UK, especially in rural communities, who are still being caught. And then the real challenge comes with, them leaving the UK and then coming back. So I think there needs to be some sort of calm down to kind of track the data and see how many girls leaving and then coming back to the UK. But in the UK, the numbers are not as frightening as we might expect, but it's still very frightening. Thinking of the fact that this has been criminalized already in the UK, and then we still have thousands of cases every year, and we still have midwives, reporting cases, per month, per week, of FGM incidents that they have come across within the week. So I think it's still very much a prevalent issue. We also need a lot of data tracking. I think that's a huge challenge with FGM generally, and even with gender-based violence in all parts of the world. So the numbers are still very high, not just high to the severity of what everyone else is expecting. But yes, since this has been criminalized in the UK, I would say one number is way too high for me. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, as you touched on midwives, there's I think it's called NHS Digital. There's some data about where FGM, where FGM is sort of where it most happens. And I think in midwife settings and antenatal settings is where it's most, where the first time that we know about a woman having had FGM done is when she goes for her first antenatal appointment. So it's difficult because by that age, they're already over the age of 18, and the FGM Act doesn't apply to women and girls that are over the age of 18. It sort of applies to under 18 only. So again, it's difficult to sort of prove that has this happened when they were a child. There's nothing that can be done at that stage. But I'd like to ask you both the next question. So what do you think the demographic for FGM is? I'll start with Dr. Lynda.
Okay. Yeah, so demographics for FGM, like we've all pointed out, it's a global issue. It's a global tragedy, if you would ask me, because we still talk about it in 2023 is alarming. The fact that it's not yet I would imagine that FGM would be like smallpox now, but we still have to talk about FGM, and that's very, very disheartening for me. In the United Kingdom, it's not as rampant in the developed world like you would have in other continents across the world. So I do know that based on statistics from WHO, it says that about 200 million women have undergone FGM as at, I think, last year. Not just an acute incident, but like as at 200 women who are still alive have undergone FGM, which is very, very alarming. And why that is alarming is considering the fact that one of the second risk factors you would think about with FGM is, first is being born into an FGM community. Second is being born to someone who has had FGM done. But that's the beautiful thing when you're in a healthcare setting, for instance, you want to have that conversation with someone who has been affected by this to see where they stand, and I'm happy when I see someone who has had this event done for them and they tell me that they don't want to go ahead with this for their child. They tell you their story of how this has just not been a fair treatment for them, and they do not want that to happen to their daughter or their daughters. So that kind of reassures me that if these 200 million women across the world begin to think this way, and that is why what we're doing today is important, the advocacy, the awareness. If these 200 million women across the world begin to think differently, then we are making some progress, because they are less likely to have their children go through FGM practices. Of these 200 million women, the distribution is mostly in African continents, Asian continents, and not as much in developed parts of the world.
And Heritage, do you have anything to add to that?
With regards to the UK, I think we just have to focus on um rural communities, places that are kind of not really in the eyes of the media. Even in terms of data, we do not really have specific data on those parts. So I think generally that would be a major challenge, talking about the the natural division in any society of the middle class, the lower class, and all that. And then the second is actually education. I think in places where this is not adequately discussed and there's no so much training, even for the midwives, even for people in the health care field and sector, I think there will be more naturally prevalent cases in those areas. So the focus is to bring this message or this awareness to every single community in the UK, and then actually reaching out to places that are not in the eye of the media, or just general statistics captured. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with Heritage on the part that education has to play. Um, for just asking Heritage from your experience with working in African continents, you can imagine what the difference would be in the knowledge level, or the how people validate the fact that this is a crime, if I'll put it that way. So yeah, education needs to really play a huge role in getting people on board, to say this is clearly a crime, not just because when you talk about FGM, I think the reason why some people still hold it very dear to their hearts is that there are social norms around it. Um, it's also you probably would meet teenage girls who in these parts of the world where FGM is a practice, who are looking forward to having it done because it makes them feel like it's a sense they've been told that it welcomes them into womanhood. And they feel like if they don't do it, they won't be respected, they wouldn't be accepted, they would be seen like outcasts in the community. So it's a social norm that needs to change. And one of the greatest ways of changing social norms is giving people the right information and also placing it side by side, that not only does this have no medical benefits, but letting people see through the life course of what the experience is like to have an FGM. It doesn't stop at the pain, it doesn't stop at the bleeding, it doesn't stop at the risk of infection that happens in that moment. It goes on to begin to affect sexual and reproductive health, risk of maternal and child mortality, how they go on to have their sexual health experiences. So it's it's a long-term problem, and we can't even delve into how it affects the individual psychology and mental health going forward. So it's a whole lot to unbundle and unpack, that I think that we need to begin to place it side by side for people to see. It doesn't just stop at, oh, I've done the court and now I am now a woman. But what kind of how does it affect your whole health going forward if things go the wrong way? So yeah, I completely agree with Heritage on that.
Thank you both for raising such important points. And I think, the part about it being a social norm is really quite important. I think if you've grown up in sort of a society and an environment where this is something that happens to every single woman and girl that it's sort of understandable to feel like that you'd want to have that done and you'd want your children to have that done. But again, as you said, providing the right information and the education, I think, is the most important part. So thank you both for sharing that. And I guess just sort of adding on to that, what do you guys think are the reasons that FGM is performed? I'll start with Heritage.
Okay, so right off the top of my head, I would definitely cite social norms. There is a culture basically that kind of gives people the impression that they can dictate what happens to the woman body or to the female body. So it's not just about bodily autonomy. We're talking about the mindset itself that drives the feeling that women or girls or females generally are inferior to men. So they believe that they kind of have a say. And unfortunately, this has kind of affected even the culture of women themselves, who feel that they have to submit to that idea and the perception that there is a dignity attached to FGM. There is literally no scientific or valid claim that supports that idea, but it has been passed on from generation to generation. So this means that it's a stronghold of mindsets that we are dealing with here with FGM. I think the second thing is that I would cite is child marriage. Like I mentioned initially, in her dream initiative, that is what our major focus is on. And we then had the opportunity to look into FGM and see that they are very interlinked and interconnected. Most times, the man demands that the girl is caught before she's married, in some sort of ritual or rites, to marriage. And then the third one I would cite, sadly, is poverty, because to a very large extent, there is a way you think, you know, not just lack of money itself, but the mindset that drives poverty. So people do not really seek to be educated or informed on certain cultures and ideas and beliefs. They just go ahead with it and just pass it on from generation to generation without wanting to get adequate information on it. So I think there's also that sort of reluctance to get the information that they know they need, and they just seek to see that, okay, this thing has been done and then people are doing it. So I mean, there might be nothing wrong or there might be something wrong, but I really don't know how to find out. So that's lack of education as well. And then the last thing I would point out is definitely political will. I think it's just really sad that even now we're having the conversation of FGM not being criminalized in some certain countries or some certain parts of the world, because this really just takes a serious government, serious policies, serious enforcement to get FGM out of the way. I've seen situations where, I mean, for example, as a student of history, you would see that there's been a lot of barbaric cultural practices in the past. I remember one very prevalent in like decades ago was the killing of twins. I mean, twins were being killed just because they were born, because they felt there was some evil attached to it. And then there was a clampdown. There was political will, there was collective action. And even with the strong cultural mindset that backed this up, it was completely curbed and done away with. So I think this can be done with FGM. We just need calm down. We just need a very serious government and serious action to be taken. We need people to realize that there is no reason whatsoever to feel like, I mean, even in the context of upholding the dignity of women, we don't need men to uphold our dignity. We know what we know what we are, we know our value. We do not need to be placed in that position of, okay, now you are more dignified than other women. It makes absolutely no sense. And I strongly believe that political will has played a major factor in why we have FGM to date.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It's very informative. Dr. Lynda, do you have anything to add?
Just a bit about, just basically she said all of it really. You can't talk about why FGM is still happening without talking about social norms. And somewhere deep in the midst of that social norm factor, you're thinking about things like people in communities where it's still practiced. It's a thing of wanting to have some form of sexual control or sexual leash upon the girl child as they grow up, to make sure that they are in a certain way. Or to make, so talking about when young girls who go into child marriage for no control of theirs have FGM, it's being done with the mindset that it would assure marital fidelity for the man who is going to marry her. So all of that is in all, it's tragedy. It's a barbaric practice that, like I said, I feel like FGM should be something in the past, as far back as the time of smallpox. I'm so sad to think that we still talk about it now, and to think that a girl child is born and just by virtue of where she's born into, she could have an FGM done. So I think changing these mindsets, not just from a point of education, but from a political point as well. Not just by saying, okay, we have a policy. I'm just going to share an interesting fact I found while I was reading. The way a policy is framed also tells you how the people who have framed the policy think about the policy. So in the United Kingdom, it says you get a minimum of 14 years in prison. And I came across a policy yesterday that said you get not more than 4 years in prison. So in reading that policy, I'm like, you can already spot the difference in the thoughts. Whoever made this policy suddenly thinks that it's not so much of a crime that you shouldn't spend more than 4 years in prison for it. You understand? So it means you can have 2 years. It means you can have 2 months. And even with that policy in place, they haven't caught one person. They haven't taken one person to court. So it tells you a lot about the fact that maybe this was just paperwork. Maybe truly in their hearts of heart, they don't see why this is important and why this should be addressed, you know? So we're in a place where we need to start telling stories, be it anonymized stories or not, but people need to come up and speak up about how this has affected their lives. Because when we say it, sometimes it looks like it's all in the cracks. You can't see who it's happening to because no one is really sharing their lived experiences. People need to begin to speak up in anonymized formats that make them feel safe, or in whatever way makes them feel safe, so that we can get these numbers captured. This is happening and this needs to be curbed. There is no reason, like Heritage said, why this is still an issue in the world of today. And the other thing as well is I completely agree with the factor of poverty, education, and women empowerment as a whole. Because sometimes when women have had certain practices done to them, when they have daughters, I haven't had a lived experience, but when I watch some of these movies that have to deal with FGM, you find out that the mother of the child might be she's very clear. She's very specific about what she doesn't want to happen. You know, she doesn't want this to happen to her daughters. But then she's in a situation whereby she lacks the capacity to make any change or make any move because she's limited maybe by finances or maybe by education or maybe by her level of empowerment. So we need to start working towards, and that's like the whole idea of the 16 days of activism for gender-based violence, the reason for driving investing to prevent. We need to work towards a society where women can make decisions for themselves and not feel like they are threatening their existence by standing for what they believe in, you know? So I'm looking forward to a world that becomes like that, where it doesn't matter where you're born into, but then when you grow up and you look down on your female genital part, it will just be the way you want it to be or the way it came into the world to be, and not because while you were still a teenager or while you were still an infant, someone has done some things to it that you couldn't remember, or you remember and it follows on with your mental and psychological well-being.
Exactly. Thank you both, ladies. I think the reasons are very varied in terms of why FGM happened. It's quite difficult, but I think you've both touched on some really important points. So thank you for sharing that. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add on what other reasons it could happen.
Yeah, I just want to point out a unique one. It's not really, you know, discussed in the UK, probably because of the stage of peace and security. But terrorism in some parts of the world can also be a driver of FGM. A lot of people believe that by mutilating that part of the body, the girl child becomes less attractive, and so she doesn't stand the chance to be raped in case of war crimes and then crisis generally. Basically, a lot of crises, climate crisis, in times of war, disasters, and natural disasters. So this is a factor that, you know, I've been doing a lot of research on this year, especially with regards climate crisis. I've seen that in times of war, people tend to try to, you know, make attempts on the female body to make them less attractive and vulnerable to rape and sexual violence. So we do not only have FGM, there's also breast ironing, which is very much a thing in, you know, parts of the country where terrorism is taking place widespread. So basically the flattening of the breast with a very hot, I'm sorry for being graphic, but I'm just trying to give context to the word breast ironing. So it's literally as the word implies. Yes. So that's it's kind of a twin practice that now takes place. So you have cases of girls who have undergone FGM and breast ironing at the same time. So that's a lot of pain for a girl to go through.
Yeah.
So peace and security is also a factor we need to consider in certain parts of the world as well.
It's very interesting. I didn't know about that actually. So thank you for
I didn't
sharing
hear
that.
about that as well.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to add, Dr. Lynda?
Not. I think we've kind of touched on the important things. It's more about like I said when we started recording, it's about doing the talk and doing the work, doing the work as well. We hope that these conversations, when they are had, they bring about change. They get the right people, and they begin to reframe thoughts about what people think of this. And talking about gender-based violence and investing to prevent, it's my hope that FGM is like on the top of the priority list, because it should have gone into extinction basically. So we hope that with this awareness, with more conversations, with more politically driven interventions, that this would be a thing of the past.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for that. I think, overall, it's sort of a form of controlling women and their sexuality as well. I don't know if we touched on that. And what do you guys think the impact FGM can have on a woman could be? Some of the things. Start with you, Heritage.
Dr. Lynda has mentioned quite a number of them. The psychological effect, the fact that it definitely directly affects the reproductive health of females. I think one we do not really highlight is also the economic effects. And since we're talking about investing and people think about money, and I think that's another thing, when we're talking about sexual violence, FGM, people tend to think, oh, there's so many things going on in the UK at the same time. There's the cost of living crisis, and why should FGM be priority? Why should it? Because it affects that same money you're thinking of. It affects the economic progress of society. When you have women who are being affected, health wise, they're unable to go into the labor market, they're unable to work. Cases of girls who actually die in the process, cases where this is not even done with proper instruments, and then they get sexually transmitted diseases, or just generally infections and diseases that may end up ending their lives. So we have this directly affecting the society. It's not just the numbers, it's not just statistics, it's the fact that it's delaying sustainable development as we know it. It's delaying the achievement of SDG 5. Definitely we cannot say gender equality has been achieved without tackling FGM. So I think these are the direct impacts and effects, apart from the ones that Dr. Lynda has so rightly mentioned.
Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Lynda, do you have anything to add?
Talking about the impacts on the women, I think we've covered that area, and Heritage has also talked about the impact it's having on the workforce, the economy, the sustainable development of the world at large. The other thing as well is talking about investing to prevent, and how important FGM, addressing FGM problems are. When a woman, let's take a single life for a case analysis. So when this procedure is done for the girl child, and the risk of infections and the risk of blood loss happens, those are all healthcare encounters that require money if you're going to take care of her and prevent her from dying. And after that phase is gone through, and she gets to a point where she starts dealing with the chronic pain, those are all healthcare encounters that would require service to be paid for. And then after that, and she gets into the point of achieving puberty and has to have menstruation cycle start. Some girls are unable to menstruate because the opening has been narrowed, and they get to have chronic pain and other medical conditions that in some cases would now require another surgical intervention to correct the problem that has been caused. Those are all healthcare encounters that will require money. I'm not talking about the psychological effect that she goes through right from being a child every time she has to deal with this problem and wonder why I can imagine what it would feel like to begin to associate womanhood with pain from a very early age, having to deal with chronic pain, having to deal with menstruation-related pain, and then up until the time of having sexual exposure, the chronic pain that comes with that, and up until the point of having a child, the risk of significant tears, significant problems, obstructions that could come from trying to pass a child through the female birth canal. These are all encounters that will require healthcare services and more money. And then just basically, it goes on and on and on. Chronic pain, psychological effects, mental health well-being, it goes on and on and on. So I want the government to begin to think about it from a point of, look at how much money you are spending on each child that has had this done just because someone thought it was okay, right? And if you think about that in a ripple effect, then you can see how much more, because I mean, the government likes to talk about this in numbers. So let's talk about it in numbers. If you think about it per each child that's been affected, then you can see how much money we can save if only we channel all that funding back into just putting policies in place, putting leads, putting ambassadors, putting organizations in place that criminalize this and make sure that the consequences for the actions are implemented. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much both for sharing that. As you've both touched on, there's a lot of health complications that can come with FGM, but also a lot of psychological complication. I think that's quite important to note as well, because it's something that could stay with this woman for the rest of her life. And, you know, a lot of women can have PTSD after having had FGM done as well. And as you said, you know, there's a risk during childbirth as well. So there's a lot of areas where there's a lot of risk to the woman, and, you know, it impacts her sexual health. And as I think you said, heritage in the beginning, you know, that part of it, you know, it's sort of taken away the enjoyment of sex and being able to have an orgasm in some women, you know, that can really impact someone's sort of sexual function. So thank you both for sharing your knowledge on this. And we just have a couple more questions. Do you have any suggestions on how someone can stop FGM if they find out it's about to happen? We'll start with you, Dr. Lynda.
Right. So I'll talk about what's available in the United Kingdom, and I think Heritage probably would, because she works across African countries, so she'll probably have more information. But I'll just drop a few couple of hints I know for other parts of the world. So with regards to the United Kingdom, the first, because it's a crime. It's not, no matter how anyone wants to make it look like it's just not what it is. It is a crime. So when you as a healthcare professional find someone who might be at risk of FGM, your first point of contact is the police. You're supposed to get in contact with the police to see how you can help this person. And the same applies to, there are quite very rich resources all over the internet from the NHS to help people know what to do when they've seen someone, a friend, a sister, or a relative who you think is at risk of FGM or is being planned to take a trip to some parts of the world to have FGM practices done. It would say, go ahead and get in touch with call 999 and get through to the police. We've got national FGM support clinics across the United Kingdom as well that you can reach out to. All you need to do is go online and browse national FGM support clinics, and you will find contact numbers that can help you link up with them. The National Health Service also has a child protection helpline that you can get in touch with if you know anyone who might be at risk. And there is also NSPCC, which stands for National Society for the Protection of Cruelty on Children. So they are also at the forefront of addressing FGM-related problems. So these are all services that you can get in touch with if you know or you spot someone who you think might be at risk, or even if you as yourself feel like you are at risk. But if you can't remember all of these contacts, just call the police. Really, that's how easy the access is to seeking help with FGM. And I think that's the difference we have with the United Kingdom and some parts of the world, because then you begin to think, who do I go to? Who do I talk to? How do I know they wouldn't interrogate me or judge me first or try to blame me or something? You know, even as a mom, and then she's thinking, what if I go somewhere and they probably try to belittle it or try to accuse me or try to blame me, you know? So all of that makes it much more of a complex problem than it is here. But in other parts of the world, I know about Plan International. It's an international organization across different parts of the world. I know we have them in Nigeria as well, and they're quite passionate about the girl child and quite passionate about FGM. I honestly, at the moment, do not know what degree of work that they are doing to address FGM, but I do know that they have that as within their scope of work. But it will be interesting to hear from Heritage about what is going on in other parts of the world.
Thank you, Lynda.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lynda. I think it's quite interesting you mentioned Plan International because I serve as one of the youth advisors in Nigeria for Plan International.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so yeah, they're doing a lot of work, and not just Plan. We have so many organizations. Frankly, we have CCR in Lagos. We have the Lagos Center on sexual violence. They're doing a lot of amazing work on FGM, and I think this is simply because it has been domesticated as a law in Lagos State, Nigeria. So I think with other countries, the first thing to actually do is to just, take a quick Google search and actually find out if this is legal in your country or if it is illegal. That might have to do with a bit of like complex legal jargon on trying to find out whether there is an enforcement of CEDAW, that's the convention, eliminating discrimination against women. So yeah, every country, but CEDAW is one of the most reserved convention that we have in terms of international law. So a lot of countries have signed CEDAW, but they have not ratified that particular article that speaks against FGM. And this is a very deliberate act, and I would quite frankly just call it a very wicked diversion. So we have a lot of countries that have signed CEDAW and domesticated it, but they have reserved that article that says that they cannot or they have to prohibit FGM in their states. So you would have to find out if your state is one of those that fall into that category. If they are, you'd have to reach out to comprehensive health centers, and comprehensive health centers in the context of youth-friendly centers that actually take up these cases and offer some sort of, therapy, guidance, support, advocacy. And in some cases, actually, they take it up legally. So what we have in Nigeria is we have quite a number of cases currently, ongoing in courts. We have not just gotten judgments on them. Definitely with a lot of networks of lawyers now who do cases like this pro bono. We have FIDA, the Federation of International Women Lawyers, who just take up FGM cases. We have a lot of these networks and associations across the African continent. So they take up these cases individually. Another very unique thing you can actually do, as long as your state has ratified that particular article and domesticated it into their laws, is to actually send a report to OHCR, that's like the general body for international law, and making a report online. People don't know about it, but generally human rights violations can be reported directly, and then the states would have to answer for that violation. So if you have, for example, 70 people coming together and reporting a single violation, there's definitely going to be attention on it. I'm also going to use this opportunity to call out media, people in the media. Please use your platform, use your voice to speak out about this issue. media has played such a big role in justice generally in different parts of the world. We've seen collective action with regarding the media space, and we've seen the government being forced to step into action simply because there is a loud cry for justice. So I think we should also leverage on what social media can do. The naming and shaming in quotes, and just calling people out can get things done as well.
Definitely. Thank you both for sharing that. And I think I just wanted to add just one point to what Dr. Lynda said. If you work with children, if that's like a healthcare setting or in schools, you can also contact your local safeguarding lead. And if you don't know what you need to do, they can always help as well. But I think you guys have touched on some really important points, so thank you for that. And what do you guys do in terms of, are you actively involved in helping stopping FGM? Do you do any work on FGM yourselves? Start with you, Heritage.
So very briefly, because I do not want to go into so many details. So I run an NGO in Nigeria. We have a referral and support system for survivors of FGM. We call them survivors because some actually die, and that is when they become victims. So
Okay.
we refer them to helplines and legal supports for people who want to take it up. And then we also started a bit of advocacy against FGM in conjunction with breast ironing this year. We've gotten some really interesting feedback with that as well. So I think in the UK, I simply just partner with organizations that do the same. We do a lot of research, collaborative works with Thrive, CIC, a social enterprise in the UK here. And that's also been very progressive because we have recorded tractions of cases we've been able to handle together. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That sounds like very important work, Heritage. And what about you, Dr. Lynda?
Well, aside from the advocacy, it's pretty much in my line of work to spot people who might be at risk from having these conversations. So it's more like a position of adult and child safeguarding, if I'll put it that way, spotting any child who might be at risk and taking the appropriate steps to make sure that they get the help that they need.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I just had a few more questions for you guys. Do you have anyone that you'd like to step forward or take action on FGM? Anyone that comes to mind?
I think we've pretty much touched all around it really in the course of the conversation. But the other thing I would say is what we see as the numbers, but in other parts of the world, not necessarily in the United Kingdom, but also in rural parts of the United Kingdom, what we see as the numbers are people who have turned up to the healthcare setting or turned up to a place where they could be identified. There are lots of people who don't get recorded, who by virtue of fear or by women who their children might have been affected and they really do not want this to happen, but they're scared of the consequences in terms of how it affects their finances going forward, who will take care of them, all because they are in a situation where they're not financially able to sustain themselves if they speak up, So I really, it resonates with me, the idea of invest to prevent and the role that has to play in empowering women. Because the more empowered women are, the more they are able to make independent decisions for themselves, So I'm really hoping to see a world where women have the capacity all around to make decisions for themselves, to speak for themselves, and not feel like they are, because it's hard to have this conversation with, how do I put it? So I've had situations back home where you hear stories of people who have been affected by domestic violence, for instance, and she's telling you, I can't leave now because I'm not ready to leave. There have been cases like that documented in the media or in movies. where they say, I can't leave now because I can't, what happens when I leave? Where do I go to? Who takes care of me? It's not every part of the world that has a social system that takes care of you when things go wrong. So I think that is still an issue of poverty and education and women empowerment that we still need to solve. People need to be able to make a decision and know that if they make that decision, they are sustainable. So that's the word I'm looking forward to, really.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Lynda. Do you have anything to add, Heritage?
I would just like to use this opportunity to also appeal to the feminist movement. I've come to see how divided and fractured it could be sometimes. Addressing cases or addressing issues or topics such as women leadership, championing for women to lead in spheres. Yes, it's a very valid conversation, but I also think we should not forget that there are prevalence issues that are very much the reality that girls face every single day, and FGM is one of them. So I want to appeal to the feminist movement not to leave behind FGM. As barbaric as it sounds, it's still going on, and because it is barbaric, we need to get rid of it completely to kind of make a wholesome movement to gender equality and the feminist movement as well.
Definitely. Thank you both. And I think we're on to our last question. Where can people find out more information about FGM? Do you guys have any sort of resources that you'd like to share?
For me, I think I have one. I think I will tell you to check out Thrive CIC. We operate as a social enterprise in the UK. I'm one of the law changers, so I can attest to the fact that there's so much data and resources you need on FGM on our website. I would also recommend reading a book if you can, if you're not not everybody likes books, to be very honest, but if you like to read, you might want to pick up a copy of Hibo's book, Hibo Wadere. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but she's in the UK of Somalian descent, I think. And
Yeah.
she has a book on FGM called Caught. It is very detailed and gives you insight into what is going on in the UK and how you can take action. Because I think it's so important not to feel helpless when you hear things like this. You can actually do something from your space, from your room, with your phone. Yes.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, I think I mentioned a couple of them while I was speaking earlier. So first point of contact is using your phone, like Heritage mentioned. You can actually just call 999 if someone you know is at risk, or if you yourself happen to be at risk, and then speak with them. I know that within Greater London area, they've got the Metropolitan Police working on a project called Project Azure. If you Google that online, you would find them, and they have got a contact number, and you can reach out to get in touch with them. And then the other one is the NSPCC, which is the National Society for the Protection of Cruelty on Children. They're also at the forefront of that in the United Kingdom. And like Heritage mentioned, one thing you don't want to feel in this situation is the helplessness. It's interesting to hear that a lot of work is going on in Lagos State, Nigeria. But then again, I also can imagine what it is like in some states or in some parts. This happens in patches. In any place where the policy has not been, where it hasn't been criminalized and you haven't put in place significant implementation structures, it means that there are still patches where it could be happening and the person would not know where to run to or where to go to. So that's why I think about Plan International, because I feel like they've got a good wide coverage across different parts of the world where this is likely happening. So perhaps just reaching out, calling one of their contact numbers and speaking to them, they could probably be able to link you up with a lead or someone who can be of help in that area. It would be nice if Heritage can talk a bit about if there are, like, what happens, what the process would be like if someone reaches out to Plan International in other parts of the world.
Okay, so the way the process works is we have something called a focal point officer. So
Okay.
currently in Nigeria, Plan has country offices in 6 states. So you can actually visit, those places in person to submit a report or, something you want to get solved. Plan has a very effective legal aid, and I think it's surprising how fast it is. They're very fast with actions like this. So you might also want to just give a call and just simply send an email. The focal points, depending on whether it's a child or someone over 18 involved, then the case is either forwarded to a specialist on children, who would then take up the child, in case of emergencies where it is the family that is, endangering the life of the child. Then there's, some sort of um aid to make sure that for that moment the child is safe. And, in the other side, if it's someone that is over 18, you're then immediately forwarded to the legal aid, who will then take up your case. I think that plan is very flexible with the actions they take, and they have case by case scenarios. I've seen cases where, they've had, children who are in crisis scenarios, actually taken out. Because the thing is, when you are in immediate danger, you're not exactly thinking of these step by step processes. So we don't really have, like, um let's say, a very rigid procedure on what to do. It's very much flexible, and it's done to make sure that you are, calm psychologically, and that you're not taking actions that are too swift and then, end up endangering the life of the child or any other person involved. So this is pretty much the process in every Plan International office that I know of. I think I've done some work with Plan International Ghana. It's very similar. Plan International Sierra Leone is very similar as well. And they've been able to also do something which I want to highlight very shortly, is empowering even girls. Before I got into Plan, I always used to think the solution to period poverty was just distributing more pads and advocating for period taxes to be removed. But I saw that in Plan International in Nigeria took up actually making pads. So girls in the north now, we have some parts of girl, like some parts of the north, where girls can actually make sanitary pads by themselves. They know how to properly dispose. They are so aware of the hygiene. And this is because Plan is very intentional with actually speaking with people, communicating and knowing the exact action to take, because every unique problem requires a unique solution. And I think Plan has recognized this. I'm not really a Plan, I'm not doing an ad or a marketing for them, but I'm
Yeah,
just
I
saying that
understand
there are
that.
so many organizations doing this as well. We have Amnesty International, Amnesty International, very much open with the media and calling out your government. If you need someone to call out your government, you need to go to Amnesty. They are the ones who are very vocal, and they are very, I won't say confrontational, but just make sure that your voice is heard, basically. So if it has to do with advocacy, getting the laws to be domesticated, I mean, they've been doing a lot of that in the north, putting some pressure on leaders to make sure that VAP Act is domesticated in Nigeria. And this cuts across different parts of the world as well.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think just to add as well about resources, there's, as you said, there's a lot of charities in the UK. You can go on the WHO website and find out more about FGM. It's just, it's about sort of thinking about where you can find that knowledge and looking for it. Even if you just Google what is FGM and how can I help, there's a lot of resources out there for people who want to know more and people who want to get involved as well. And I think finally, how can people reach both of you guys if they wanted to sort of get in contact with you, if they wanted to know more about the work that you're doing?
Okay, so I'll go first then. You can reach me on LinkedIn. So simply type Lynda Odoh LinkedIn and you'll see me on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's one way to reach out to me. Yeah.
Okay, I think for me, many ways. I'm on a lot of platforms, but generally, Heritage, Sanmi-Lawal on general platforms that you're on. I think I do well with LinkedIn. You can also send an email to her dream initiative at gmail.com. I think it's her dream, then full stop, then initiative at gmail.com. Regarding any collaborative projects you would like to carry out, research projects as well, you can reach out to us in that email or just send a personal message on LinkedIn. Anyone is fine.
Amazing. Thank you so much, both of you guys, for sharing your knowledge today and your expertise in this difficult subject. Do you guys have any sort of final thoughts, anything else that you'd like to add before we end the session? I'll start with you.
I'm done. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add. I think we've spoken about most of it, so I don't have anything else to add. Yeah.
Amazing. And you, Heritage, do you have anything else to add?
Oh, the same goes for me. Just want to say thank you for having me here speak about this issue. And I really hope, by next year we would have to have
a meeting for this. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you both, Dr. Lynda and Heritage, for taking your time today on a Monday afternoon to come and educate us and talk about FGM. And for the viewers, all the links will be in the text under the video if they want to reach out. Thank you for watching, and please donate and stay tuned for the next episode.
Thank you, Asha. Thank you, Harry.
Don't forget to donate to Safe Spaces now, link next to the video.